Welcome, everyone. My name is Charlene Margot, and I am co-founder of nonprofit The Parent Venture, the organization that brings you this program, the Parent Education Series, now in its 17th year. We are so delighted and proud to have with us tonight Ashish Goel, who is the author of the new book, Drawing on Courage, Risks Worth Taking and Stands Worth Making. It is part of a new series of books that he'll tell you more about from Stanford's D.school, which is our neighbor here in Silicon Valley. But again, this series is very important and very interesting, brand new. Literally, the books have just arrived. So very excited to be here tonight, have Ashish with us and all of you. Special thanks, as I mentioned, to Ashish. We know that this is a timely topic and of interest to you, parents and educators and community members, with more than 250 people registered for an evening, which is the beginning of summer, we think is pretty great. We are sponsored tonight. The special event is sponsored by generous donors from the Mills Peninsula Hospital Foundation, the San Mateo County Office of Education, and this organization, the Parent Venture. Ashish is going to be doing some interesting activities with you, talking more about his book, leading you through courage and what that means. And then we'll have a few minutes at the end for your questions. So this is a webinar format. Most of you are familiar with it by this point, but I do want to let you know that we have two ways for you to communicate with us, both the chat. My partner, Bev Hartman, will be working in the chat and putting links and resource links for you, and then also the Q&A button. So again, to ask questions, to communicate with one another, or to ask logistical questions, please use the chat. But for questions later, we'd like you to use the Q&A. This event is being recorded and will be available soon on our video library. This resource is free and has become a popular resource for parents with more than 60,000 views. Again, we are grateful to our partners, the Boys and Girls Club of the Peninsula, for their partnership in videography. At the very end of the event, Bev will put a little link to a survey. We hope you will take literally a minute to fill that in. Your input is very important to us. Okay, let me tell you a little bit about tonight's featured presenter. Ashish Goel is a designer, teacher, and entrepreneur based in Gurugram, India. That's where he is this morning, his time. He is a former teaching fellow at the Stanford D.school, where he taught classes on design thinking, digital product design, and map making. He is also the former head of design at, I'm not sure about the pronunciation here, Aziz, Zomato.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, India's Doordash and Yelp rolled into one. He currently advises technology companies in the art and science of product design and is the author of the new book, Drawing on Courage, Risks Worth Taking and Stands Worth Making, part of a series of new guides being published by the Stanford D.school. Welcome, Ashish. We are so glad to have you with us tonight. Take it away.
Thank you, Charlene. Thank you, Bev, for having me. It's great to be here. Yeah, I am right now in Gurugram, and it's 7 a.m. in the morning for me. Charlene already introduced me. I'm born and raised here in Gurugram, India. I currently am spending a lot of my time doing design work at an Indian technology company. And what brings me here is I used to be a teaching fellow at the D.school. So the D.school, for those who you don't know, is a design institute at Stanford, whose mission is not to teach designers, but to teach non-designers the tools of design and design thinking so that they can take it back to whatever context they're from and apply those design thinking tools to make the companies they work for, the context they work for, and their own lives better. I'm not a parent myself, but this month my brother, who actually lives in Colorado, and his wife and kids are visiting us, and we were able to take a little trip to Agra. So this photo is from just last week. So thank you for being here. I have made this quite interactive, and Charlene informed me that some of you may not have an access to a sheet of paper and a pen, but well, you can just imagine if you were doing the activity. For those of you who do have an access to a pen, and a notebook, and sheets of paper, please have them handy. Every once in a while, I'll ask you a question or request you to respond in the chat. Does that sound good? Please type with a thumbs up. Bev, let me know if, I can't see the chat myself, but let me know if you're getting some, oh, I can see some flying thumbs ups, lovely. All right, and then the activities are timed. I'll run a timer here and I'll let you know 30 seconds before it ends. Thank you for all those thumbs ups. All right, so today we're talking about courage. So I have a question for you. Just take a couple of minutes, think about it, and write that in the chat. Why does courage matter? I have a little timer running here on my desk. Take a minute and write in the chat, why does courage matter? Bev, you may have to unmute yourself and maybe read out some of the responses.
It helps you to try new things, helps you to face, sorry, that one left quickly, because it allows others to do the same. Courage helps us make the world we live in, the world we want to live in, to express who you are without fear and to stand up for what we believe. It inspires action. Courage matters because it helps you do scary, non-popular things or to fix or remedy issues. You step out of your comfort zone.
Fantastic. Great responses. I think that courage is a precursor to any kind of change, whether that's change you're bringing to your own life, like someone said, trying a new thing, or that's a change that you're trying to bring to an organization that you have just joined or have been for a while. Without courage, there is no change. And I think there are really two flavors of courage. I call them epic courage and everyday courage. We often associate courage with big, momentous acts. For example, I discovered something called the Civil Courage Prize, which is granted, which people are nominated for when they've shown steadfast resistance to evil at great personal risk. Now that sounds a bit scary and a bit intense, and rightfully so. This award is given to people who have done really outstanding, fear-inducing acts in their lives. But that's not the courage that I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is those little acts of courage you have to do every day. Since many of you are parents and people who work with students and kids, I mean, this could be, like some of you said, trying a new activity. It could be as simple as that. It could be about admitting a mistake when you've broken the neighbor's window. It's about doing the right thing, like standing up for another child who's being bullied. Or it might be just to take a risk. That's my niece trying rock climbing for the first time. So something as simple as that, those little acts that you do every day, that's the kind of courage that I think all of us need to do a bit more of. And what happens is that we mistake everyday courage with the fears that are associated with epic courage, right? Now, epic courage is universally lauded, like with awards, whereas everyday courage is more personally felt. It's you take a risk, you overcome a challenge in your own life, and you feel good about it. Epic courage is potentially ruinous. One of the awardees of the award I mentioned, she had to turn her own home into a shelter for women who suffered domestic violence, and she even courted jail time. Whereas everyday courage is merely risky. You think there is much more challenges or consequences ahead, but often it turns out things are merely risky. And while epic courage is an exceptional act, and maybe all have a chance to do that when the time comes, but everyday courage is lots of little actions. And in this talk, in this book, I want to talk about how we can all do a little bit more of that. So our goal today is to get our kids to practice more everyday courage. Wait, actually, our goal today is to practice everyday courage ourselves. And why do I say that? Oops, I'm going the other way. I say that because courage is contagious. I think as parents and educators and people who work with kids, of course we want our kids to be courageous, but kids model behavior that they see in the people around them. And courage is contagious. An act of courage gives others permission and inspiration to act with courage in their own lives. And that's what we want to practice a bit more of today. Okay, so next question. What's the biggest hurdle to choosing courage? Again, please think about it for a minute. I have a timer running here, and write down your responses in the chat.
So there's fear of failure, fear, fear of judgment, fear something bad will result. Fear seems to be repeated several times.
Yes, yes.
Worried about what others will think about us or consequences, ownership of outcome, getting out of comfort zone.
Indeed. So the biggest hurdle to courage is indeed fear, as scarily sketched by my illustration collaborator Ruby. And fear always comes in the way. And the challenging thing about choosing courage is the fear never goes away. Like, you can do things to reduce it, but choosing courage is about action in the face of fear, not in the absence of fear, right? As the ever-quotable Mark Twain has said. So to practice courage, what we're going to do is a scary activity. I don't know if all of you have access to a piece of pen and paper, so we're going to be writing a few things. Like I said before, in case you're just listening in, you can listen to it right now and then practice it at home, or just imagine as if you're doing it. So what we're going to do right now is draw a self-portrait. I'm going to pause there for a second and ask you. You can reply with that emoji if it makes you scared, and you reply with like sunglasses emoji if it makes you excited. Type in your responses on how that makes you feel, the prospect of making a self-portrait. All right, there's a little mouth open with like, OMG. There's some celebration emoji, okay. Some excitement there. More excitement, lots of excitement, okay. Oh, so one more like scary emoji and excitement. Seems like it's a bit of a mix here, but I'm seeing more scary faces than celebratory faces. Just kidding. What we'll be doing instead is what I call a self-stick figure. All right, so you pull out your pens and papers, and I will give you instructions, and then you can just draw along. So first, let get our hands a little warmed up. We'll start with just alphabets, nothing scary here. Just write a few A's. I'm drawing here with you. A few B's. A few C's. Yeah? All right, get those hands warmed up. Next, we'll go to other parts of the alphabet. Try a few V's. Try a few W's. Try a few U's. We're going to try a few more. Some L's. Some O's. And we're going to make it a little bit difficult and go a lowercase. So try a few B's. Lowercase b. Lowercase d, and lowercase o. All right, now what we're going to do is we're going to take those alphabets together and put them down like this. you make a big O, that's the face. You make a few Z's, that's the body. You make two little O's on either side and make a small d and a small b. And then you connect those two to make what I call a Z person, a Z stick figure. You can practice drawing that a bit to get a hang of it. Draw a face, draw some Z's, draw two O's which are the arms, a little D, a little B. Try doing that a few times. See how that feels. How's that going so far? Give me a thumbs up. I see a heart. All right, good, good, nice. All right, oh, nice, okay, some thumbs ups, good. There's a raised hand. Okay, let's try some variations. Now, if you just make the Z's with just a B, an O, and a hand, you have a side view of the Z person. Try that. All right, next, let's make an excited Z person. So again, you make an O, make some Z's, and then stretch out those arms and legs to get an excited Z person. All right, next we'll make a concerned or scary Z person. So again, you have an O, more Z's, a little D, a little B, and just make two inverted L's, and you have a Z person throwing up their hands and being concerned or scared. Not scary, scared. All right. You can do a flying Z person. So again, you make an O, do some Z's, do a B and a D, give it a cape, an arm, and you're a flying Z person. And the last one, the Z person has an idea. Make two L's, up and down, and a little lightning or a bulb, whatever you like to use for idea. Okay, so now we have a new challenge. Make a stick figure and add a few features that you know make you to make a self-stick figure. For example, there is me. I'm losing my hair now, but they used to be a little curly, so I have a little curl on top, and I have these thick eyebrows. So that's Ashish. And I hope later you can email your self-stick figures to Bev and Charlene, and I can take a look at them. So take a couple of minutes and make a self-stick figure. How's that going? All right, if you're good, just give me some thumbs ups or high fives or whatever you like, whatever you're feeling in the moment. Do you like your own self-stick figure? How are you feeling about your self-stick figure? All right, one. Some laughter there, nice, nice. More laughter, okay, some love. Excellent. Okay, so let's pause here for a second. Well, we can't do that because this is a webinar. So let's pause there for a second. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to doodle with me and make a self-stick figure. So first question, on a scale of 1 to 5, how anxious did you feel when I said draw a self-portrait? On a scale of 1 to 5, you can just type in a number in the chat.
I see a 5, I see a 2, I see a 4, 5, 1, 3, 4.
Okay.
3.
So mostly,
and then a 1 and a 5. All right.
All right. I wanna hear more about the ones later, but more anxiety, more fear. Okay. And what caused the anxiety? again, take a minute to think about it and type that in, like what caused the anxiety? Why did there so many more 3, 4s, and 5s at the prospect of drawing a self-portrait?
Bad at drawing. I don't have drawing skills. Fear of judgment or failure. Lack of skills. I can't draw. I can't draw.
Okay. All right. And did your anxiety lessen when you instead drew yourself stick figure? You can reply with a thumbs up if it lessened, or a thumbs down if it didn't. Mostly some thumbs ups. Excellent. So when we talk about courage and fear, we talk about courage and fear being partners, of course, and everyone said the thing that stops you mostly is fear. But where does the fear come from? And the fear comes from the risks that are inherent in the situation that you're dealing with. Someone mentioned in the chat that the fear of looking bad, the fear of judgment. If you're in a social situation, the fear might be the judgment of others, but often it might be your own judgment of or feeling that you're not good enough. The risk might actually be getting hurt, especially if you're thinking about your kids trying to ride a bike or go rock climbing. It might be about social stigma in school among your peer group. So it's not that the fear is just there. Of course, it's there because you feel it, but what it's coming from is from risk. So what we did just now is I gave you a prompt that was much more riskier, and most of you rated 3, 4, 5 about how it felt, and then we reduced the risks. Your fears reduce as well, and not only did your fears reduce, seems like you all enjoyed just the act of moving your hands, and there was some laughter and excitement about making a self-stick figure. Now that's not necessarily a self-portrait, but it's one little baby step, one little tiny risk that can get you there if that was something that you wanted to pursue. So you never get completely rid of fear when you're choosing courage, but what you can do by taking tiny risks is you can reduce fear's power. You can shrink it. One of the improv teachers that, I never learned from her, but I learned from one of her students when I was a student at Stanford. She writes that you can't let fear consume your attention, and that's what fear does, and that's how it stops us from doing the stuff that matters to us, doing the stuff that needs courage. And this is also one of the fundamental things that we teach at the D.school courage is also the precursor to having a sense of confidence. And the way we give our students who come through the institute, who pass through the institute through our classes, is we try to put them through a series of small successes that can turn that sense of fear into familiarity, about going into an unknown situation, dealing with an unknown problem, giving them tools and small wins to be able to act with more courage. Okay, so that was just some sketching. Now let's get a little bit more real about the stuff that you're dealing with in your own life. Okay, so again, the less sketching right this time around, but on a piece of paper, just write down what's something in your everyday life that you've been avoiding out of fear, or what's an event or activity or commitment that's coming up for you that you need to do that scares you. So take a minute and think about something in your life that you've been either avoiding out of fear, or something that's coming up that you need to do that scares you. Give yourself a minute. And if you can, some of you can volunteer to share, that'd be great.
Spend money for my kids' summer camp.
Okay.
job interviews, conversation with my manager, wink, starting to date again, year-end final reports, my kid's birthday party, new career.
I'm curious about why the birthday party is scary.
New role in the career, Stanford class panel, so stressful. New virus that may show up.
Yeah, fears that you can't do much about. Okay, great. So, for example, for me, giving a talk to a new audience that I haven't spoken with before, that's a bit scary. All right, so next activity is list down your fears. Like, what is it about this thing that's coming up or what you've been avoiding in your life that scares you? Just take 5 minutes, list down everything that comes to your mind, don't filter. For example, here's everything that I wrote down when I was preparing this talk, from being really mundane, like what if Zoom doesn't work properly, to like, what do I have to say because I'm not a parent, to like wasting human hours. So don't filter, write down all the fears that come up for you when you think about the activity that you just mentioned earlier as a heart. What is it that scares you about the activity that you just mentioned scares you, from spending money for kids' summer camp to conversation with your manager to dating again to the birthday party, new career. I want you to not filter and write down everything, and want you to take a few minutes to do that. Thirty more seconds. Give me a thumbs up if you've done listing down your fears. And again, as before, if you can share something that came up that you don't mind sharing with the group.
Negative feedback, rejection, say something wrong.
getting negative feedback scares you about it. Rejection scares more.
For dating, having to share personal information with strangers, saying or doing the wrong thing, rejection. Somebody wrote, actually get the job, stressful.
Yeah.
Not having something needed for the party, few people show up, disappointing my kid, boring, embarrassing myself or team by not coming across as competent, too time consuming, veiled retaliation and psychological punishment.
Wow.
Not making it great.
Yeah, it's quite something, our fears and how the inner voice that speak to us. Okay. Last piece of this activity. I know some of these fears, as we said before, you can't get rid of them. That's the part, that is the challenge of choosing courage. You can't get rid of your fears. But what's a tiny version of something that you can do that can get you used to this feeling of fear? Or, to put it another way, to use David Kelly's way of thinking about it, can you give yourself a small success that can lessen the power of the fears that you just listed? Again, take 5 minutes and come up with ideas of how you might take a tiny risk, or how you can give yourself a small success. How can you actually embrace that fear? Could you say something wrong in a friendly setting? Could you practice rejection? Could you share personal information with someone who is somewhat familiar and not completely a stranger, something that you would not normally share with them? Again, take 5 minutes, think about how you can give yourself a small success or take a tiny risk.
To honor my feelings because they are protective and valid.
To honor your feelings because they're valid, right?
Yes. Just start the project, always the hardest part.
Indeed. Just begin. Here were some examples which I didn't share earlier. If you're scared of sharing your work with the world, you can post something small. If you have a negotiation coming up, you can practice haggling. If you're embarking on a writing project, you can start with an essay.
Someone wrote, acknowledging my first steps as an achievement.
Acknowledging, yeah, celebrating, even recognizing that a first step is a small success. Absolutely. All right, take 30 more seconds to think of a tiny risk. And if you're comfortable, share that with the group on the chat. Some of you already have.
Check in with team and ask for feedback so that I can learn and grow as I become used to my new position within the company. Reminding myself that fighting for something that is necessary is scary and worth it.
Yes.
Saving the world is not always easy.
One story that I remember that I also write about in my book is because rejection came up as one of the reasons behind the fear of the upcoming project. There's a Canadian entrepreneur, Jason Cumley, and he came up with a game called Rejection Therapy, where he will go about his day asking for things that he may not get just to hear a no. Like he might want to enter a club that he was not allowed to enter. He might ask someone a favor that he may not hear a no from. And often the surprising part is people said yes, but he would keep trying, keep asking until he got a no for the day. And that was his game to experience what rejection feels like. That's an example of a tiny risk or a small success that he designed to deal with rejection. Okay, since we do have time, what I did, yes, I got a friendly audience of one person to take my workshop while sitting in the other room before coming in front of a large group of people. Okay, so since we have time, what I also want us to do is to draw a self-stick figure taking this risk and then celebrating after. You can do just a frame if you want, or you can make 4 little boxes and use the emotions that we tried out earlier. You can show a scared stick figure, and then someone who has an idea. Then you have your little tiny risk, and then you celebrate. So again, I'll give you a couple of minutes to actually imagine you have taken this tiny risk, and how did that story play out with your self-stick figure. You can draw just a frame. You can draw just celebration. Make sure you add some dialogue. Give your little comic strip a title. Sign it. All right, 30 more seconds, and give me a thumbs up if you're finished. All right, you just drew on courage, literally. Let's talk about, I know you haven't actually taken this tiny risks, but how did it feel to play it out? How did it feel to think about the thing that scares you, list down your fears, and imagine what would be something you could do to experience that fear? Would love to learn more about how that felt. And what are you thinking, whether or not you're actually thinking about trying it, what you just came up in the activity we did earlier.
It made me feel more prepared for the challenge. It is a good technique I can apply to anything. Seeing it like this from outside seems not so bad.
Yeah, I think that's something that designers often do. I think it's a great way of framing it, seeing it from the outside. And one thing that designers do, they do this with ideas. We often like sketch or draw or get what's in our head out on a piece of paper so that you can examine it and decide if if it's a logo you're designing, if it's makes sense, if something needs to be changed. And you can do the same thing with your fears. If you can look at it from the outside, they actually lose their power a little bit.
Someone wrote reassuring and gave me some hope. And then kids would love this.
I hope so. I hope you can do this activity with them. I can imagine they'd love the little comic strip. And again, we don't have, this is a webinar, but if you can share some of your comic strips that you drew with Charlene and Bev, I would love to take a look.
Someone also added, I realize I get in my own way too much, LOL.
Indeed. Again, something that I talk about in my book is how our fears amp up the risks than the actual reality of those risks, and we don't really know. Things might actually go much better than what we fear, but it's often because our fear wants to keep us completely safe. They speak louder than they need to. Excellent. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time to dive in and draw and doodle and write about your fears this evening. Questions?
That was such fun, Ashish. I did not realize that we would be literally drawing on courage, but we did. We did. And, for those of you who don't know me, my daughter actually works for IDEO, and you think about IDEO as a design firm with sticky notes, but literally that's how they think.
Yeah.
They even take notes on sticky notes. So there'll be a lecture and they'll come back with a stack of little sticky notes with drawings and notes. Anyway, it's really fun. And it does break things down, doesn't it, Ashish?
Yeah. You can move ideas around when you put them on little sticky notes.
Exactly. So why don't you tell us, if you would, what got you to design thinking in the first place? What drew you to that?
So I studied engineering as an undergraduate student, and then I started a company where I became the official designer, not because I wanted to, but because I was one person who could use Photoshop. And that was always supposed to change, but I thought we'll hire a professional designer. But then what happened is that I discovered that design was not just making beautiful things. Design was a certain way of approaching problems and a certain ways of thinking. So one of my professors, he says, designers like to build their way forward rather than decide a way forward. So that's what I realized. There is a whole body of knowledge which is called design thinking, which is you start by empathizing and understanding people. You prototype things, you try things out like we did here. And that lets you navigate through many more problems by trying and failing, and then learning. It's a way to build your way forward rather than sort of stopping, planning, analyzing, having the answer ahead of time. So once I realized there was this body of knowledge is what drew me then to the D.school, where they offer a master's program where I studied design, and then I also had a chance to be a teaching fellow at the D.school.
Really must have been so exciting. And folks who are on with us, please do, if you have any questions for Ashish, put them in the Q&A. We'd love to hear from you. This has been a very experiential web workshop, so we really do want to get your questions answered if you have some. I have lots of questions, but I want to hear from you, okay? So Ashish, was there something about courage as a topic that attracted you in particular?
Yes. After I had so I was in the US for 4 years. I was a student for 2 years, and I was at the D.school for nearly 2 years, teaching students and working as a designer in residence. And the great thing about the D.school is that everyone's ready for some play and fun, right? It's a place that encourages risk-taking, where, you know, if you want to try a game in a class, if you want to paint a wall red, they'll be like, sure, let's do it. So they have figured out how do you create a space of safety where any student can come and take a creative risk. And I was excited to take those skill sets back to my country, back to India, at the company that I joined, Zomato. And I realized it's a lot harder when you're out of that environment, when you're back in your own milieu, to be goofy or stupid or creative or take a risk or you know, point out a different way of doing things. So whereas at the D.school, you're a large group of people, in your own environment, you're the only one. So to take that first step, to be willing to be different, that takes courage, or do things differently. So that's how, having spent time at the D.school and then spending years away from it, helped me notice what I call the courage gap, that you might have all the skills needed or all the ideas to bring change to your own life or the places that you work at, but then you don't take action because there's fear. And to bridge that, you don't need more skills and learning, you need courage.
So that's a wonderful story. Ashish, why do you think our children and teens need courage?
Why do I think our children and teens need courage? I think because children are constantly learning and growing, and they especially have to try things that they have not tried before, whether it's a new skill, a new dish, making a new friend. And all of those are little acts of everyday courage. Some children might be very friendly and gregarious, some of them might not be, and they need to overcome their own fears to practice courage and then be able to act with courage in their lives when they grow up as adults. My brother was telling me a story about my nephew. So he was cast in a play, but he didn't have enough of a speaking role. So when the play ended, he took the mic and said, I came up with this rap because I didn't have enough speaking lines. And then he rapped on stage, and then all the other kids joined in and they did their own thing. So he took a risk, and you know, like, that cascaded through his whole friend group. So I think not only do children need courage, I think children can also teach us about courage, because they are often willing to take risks that we don't always do once we become adults.
Yeah, and I think in any given school day, kids are confronted with so many new and risky situations, right? Whether it's where you sit at lunch, or can you figure out that math problem, or I don't remember what the homework was, whatever.
Yeah.
All right, here's a great question from Shelley. Have you taken a risk that didn't pan out? Does that make it harder to summon courage at the next try? Interesting example with the person wanting to get a daily no. So taking a risk that didn't pan out, my guess is you're going to say yes.
Absolutely. I think one risk that didn't pan out, or it's yet to there. I think when you take a risk, three things can happen. It goes well, it goes badly, so it's officially a failure. And the third state, I think that's the hardest, which is you don't know. You're like, is this good? Is it bad? What am I supposed to do next? So I started a business a few years ago to bring sparkling water to India. There is not much sparkling water here. And that business has sort of been puttering along. You know, I'm at a place where it's not really growing. I'm gotten more busy with other activities, and I often look back at it and I feel like a bit of a failure. And I think there are two consequences to that. One is the classic once bitten, twice shy. There is an Indian idiom that is more colorful, and I call it the buttermilk phase. So the buttermilk phase is when you've had a failure and now you are sort of keeping yourself safe from taking new risks. And I think the way you have to re-courage yourself is to reframe it. If you have to pick out the good parts, see it as learning, don't keep focusing on the part that you see as failure, because that's again your fear speaking to you. But look at the other parts and then use that as a launching point. But you're absolutely right, having a failure does take the wind out of you, and you have to consciously reframe that situation and then take a risk again.
You know, Ashish, many of our students in Silicon Valley think that they need to follow a certain path to success, you know, good grades, good job, good college, good life. What do you say to that?
What I found out is that our paths are pretty staged till maybe the age of 21, 22, because you're in school, then you go to college, then you have your first job. So till 25, it's like you have all of these hoops that you're jumping through. And I think that's after that, just it starts diverging because of the choices that someone has made. Someone might choose to go back, study more, someone might take a job, someone might start a company. So I kind of think of these as little rivers, and in the beginning they're all kind of the same, and then they start having their own path. And I think it's accepting that at any given moment in time, when you compare yourself to your peers and friends, once you cross those standard hoops, it's not going to be the same. So when you compare and feel disheartened that someone else is doing better and you're doing worse, like zoom out and recognize that you're on your own path, your own journey. And that's great. That's the path and journey you have to take.
I think we could do a better job with our kids telling them that there are lots of diverse paths to success, right? I remember when my daughter was finishing college at Stanford, and she was so sure that everybody knew what they were going to do. And I kept saying, it just doesn't work that way. But I think a lot of our kids feel that they have to just know what that path is.
I hear you. Like I would have never imagined that I would be, when I was an engineering student in my I studied biochemical engineering. And if you had told me that 10 years from then I would have been at the D.school teaching a class of graduate student design thinking, I could not have imagined that. And there's so many things that has happened in my life that I could not have anticipated. It was something that came that informed something. You know what they say, the stuff you don't know, that's the stuff that shapes your life. But I also realized that when you're a student, you want to hold on to a sense of definiteness so strongly that you sometimes forget that you have less control and you have to roll with it a little bit.
You know, school can be a very structured place, Ashish, you know that.
Yeah.
What do you think is the best way to encourage more risk-taking in the classroom? What are some, I mean, even this activity you did today, I think, before taking a test, something like that would really relax kids.
Yeah, it's hard for me to think about, especially because the only kind of classrooms that I have been and I've taught in have involved undergraduate students and graduate students. One thing that I've really seen work is that you don't have you don't have the same answer. One thing that we give at the D.school is an open-ended design project. And every student comes up with their answer. So that's when they realize there are many answers, and someone took like, I remember we had to once, when I was a student, we had to redesign a menu for a restaurant around Stanford. And because I love graphic design, all I did was I improved the typography, I made the fonts more well spaced out. One of my friends, he decided that 10, 15 minutes that you're trying to make a decision is about having conversation and having a connection. And he turned a menu into like a little board game. So when I looked at his answer, I was like, oh, that's possible too. So I think when not everyone is trying to go for the same right answer, but different students can have different answers, and then they can learn from each other, I think that can encourage people to take more risks in their own lives, that there are many paths.
I think that is a great answer. And I think more teachers could simply say that. There are many answers to this question.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
And create questions that actually require different answers.
So Ashish, you are a serial entrepreneur. What would you say to young people today if they wanted to start a business or go to a school or a college they don't know about? What would you tell them?
I've had both points of view about starting a business. I think people do it with lots of different reasons. That's a good question.
You don't have to answer it. It's just a question.
Yeah. I would say that they should know why they're doing it. I think a lot of people, especially since I work in the startup world, a lot of people just do the startup because their friends are doing a startup. That's a cool thing to do. I think giving yourself time to step back and reflect on why you're making that choice, and if that choice is right for you. If it is right for you, then you create the conditions of whether it's fundraising or finding a co-founder or whatever else that you need to do, then you do it. So step back and know why you're doing it rather than doing it just for the sake of doing it.
Really good advice. Thank you. So Ashish, in the minute or so that we have left together, what kind of final words do you want for us? We just have loved this hour with you tonight, and your book. There's a link in the chat, everybody. I hope you will go get it. It is a wonderful book. So kind of any parting comments for us?
My parting comments are the takeaways. So so my book has a lot of comics, which I enjoyed sharing with you, and practicing everyday courage gives you a backbone. And I want to go over the takeaways from this talk, that these 2 flavors of courage. You have to act in the face of fear, and you can never remove the risk completely, but you can practice how that fear feels when you take tiny risks first.
I love that. Everyday courage. We can all do that. Well, Ashish Goel, thank you so much for an amazing workshop. This was a wonderful way to start the summer, and we just could not be more grateful to you. So again, a big virtual thank you, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you, everybody who's been with us. This was such fun. I haven't had such fun drawing stick figures in many years.
Thank you, Charlene. Thank you, Bev. Thank you, everyone who joined. It was great to interact with you.
All right. Thank you again. Good night, everybody. Thank you for being with us. There you see a little bit more information about how to be in contact with Ashish, and just a wonderful thing. We are so privileged to be spending this time with you, and we look forward to your colleague, Susie Wise, will be coming to us in September to talk about her book on belonging. So again, thank you, everybody. We're going to say good night. All right. Good night, everyone.